Hello there. Welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earlier crimes. But before we talk crime, let's talk coloring. I will be using my stash, shopping my stash, to create a Christmas card. I'm using the Simon Says stamp, Oh Dear stamp, and its coordinating dies. I'm also using the hand-lettered holiday background stamp set. I will be stamping the reindeer and all of the accessories in Simon Says stamp intense black ink on Nina Classic Crest Solar White cardstock, 80-pound cardstock. I will stamp the background stamp in Versamark ink and heat emboss that with clear embossing powder to create some texture and interest for the background of the card. When the card is assembled, I will pull out my Wink of Stella pen and a white gel pen to add some glitter and detail to the stamped images, because every Christmas card needs a little bit of glitter. I think that's all about the coloring, so let's jump into the crime. Our alphabetical journey today takes us to Delaware. Now, Delaware was first claimed by the English in 1497. The Dutch also had a claim on the area after a 1609 exploration, and the Dutch were actually the first Europeans to set up shop or to occupy the land. It was not long, however, before the Dutch were forcibly removed by James, the Duke of York, who was the brother of King Charles II. Now, the Duke of York, claiming his brother's authority, says, I claim Delaware and the Hudson Rivers, and you all have to leave. However, Cecil Calvert, the second Baron Baltimore, who was the proprietor of the area of Maryland, also claimed to have a grant, a competing grant, on the lands on the western shore of the Delaware Bay, including all of the present state of Delaware. However, in order to not irritate King Charles, he opted to please his brother, James, the Duke of York, and did not press this claim. He was very magnanimous about it. I have this land, but I won't make it a problem for you. Whatever. At about the same time, William Penn had been granted the area of Pennsylvania, but it specifically excluded Newcastle and any of the lands within 12 miles of it. However, William Penn needed a way to get from his land, Pennsylvania, to the sea. So he entered into an agreement with James and convinced him to lease him the western shore of the Delaware Bay. In 1682, William Penn shows up in Newcastle with two documents, a charter for the province of Pennsylvania and a lease for what became known as the lower counties on the Delaware. Now, William Penn and James, the Duke of York, and their descendants went into legal battles and litigation over this land for 100 years. Yeah, 100 years. The litigation did not end until a settlement was agreed upon after the performing of a survey by Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon in the 1760s. Their work resulted in the famous Mason-Dixon line. And you would think after 100 years that would be the end of it, but no, the settlement was not actually even completed until the evening of the American Revolution. So just before the American Revolution. Delaware was one of the 13 colonies which revolted against British rule during the Revolution. And after the Revolution began in 1776, the three lower counties became the Delaware state. In 1776, they adopted a constitution declaring themselves to be the Delaware state, or Delaware state, no THE. And then Delaware ratified the U.S. Constitution on December 7th of 1787 and was the first of the original 13 colonies to join the 13 states to join the Union. Colonies, yeah. 13 colonies to join the United States. There we go. I got it out. The name, the first state, was actually something that was come up. Elementary school children came up with that title. Some funny things or interesting things about Delaware. The world's largest Lego tower was built in Wilmington, Delaware. It stands 11 stories high and consists of more than 500,000 Lego blocks. Delaware was the first state to fly the Betty Ross flag. Henry Heimlich, the inventor of the life-saving Heimlich maneuver, was from Wilmington, Delaware. The world's longest continuous poker tournament was held in Delaware, lasting 36 hours and 34 minutes. It took 11 years after the first settlers arrived in America for them to build a town in Delaware. And here's an interesting one for you that I definitely want to do more research on. It is illegal to fly over a body of water in Delaware unless there is adequate supplies of food and drinks for every passenger on the plane. What is adequate, and why is that a law? I need to look into that. In certain parts of Delaware, it is illegal to serve alcohol in an establishment where dancing is going on at the same time. At Rehoboth Beach, on Sundays, you may not trick or treat. Delaware has the highest percentage of PhDs in the country. The very first John Green tractor is in Messick's Agricultural Museum in Harrington. Delaware is the only state that does not have a national park. And Delaware is the home of one of the first cases that used DNA as forensic evidence. Now, let me start off by saying that both times I talked about Delaware, it was a little bit difficult to find a case or a story that was that pulled me in, right? Delaware seems to be a rather peaceful state. The crime rate is like average, and there have only been 2 serial killers from Delaware, which, I say only, but, 2 is still too many, but it is statistically low. So for such a small state, such a peaceful state, to have an unsolved murder for so long, that grabbed my attention. This is not a super old story. In fact, this took place in my lifetime. But again, it grabbed my attention. Our story today took place in Blackbird State Forest. Blackbird State Forest is a wild and tamed wilderness in Newcastle County, and it is a favorite spot of hikers, hunters, and researchers. Jane Pritchard was born in 1958. I couldn't find her birthday. It's not listed on her find a grave. It's not listed on her tomb. It was not listed in her tombstone. It was not listed in the research, and I actually could not find her definitive family tree. Weird, I know. And that's probably because maybe her parents or family members are still living. I know a lot of those records are sealed if you are still alive. However, Jane was born to Audrey and Walter Pritchard, who had 4 children. I think they had 2 boys and 2 girls, and Jane was the second youngest. She was described by her family as an outdoor kind of gal. She liked being outside. She liked horses. She was also described as adventurous and independent. One anecdote her brother told was that after college one year, she packed up her little Datsun and drove cross-country by herself. Jane was a botany student from the University of Maryland, and she was working on her master's degree. She often drove the 2+ hours from her home in Maryland to Blackbird State Forest in Delaware to study the plants. When Jane needed to be in the state park, she would often drive up the night before and spend the night at a friend's home. And September 19th, 1986, Jane did just that. She packed up her equipment and she headed into Delaware and spent the night with a friend. And early the next morning, about 7 a.m. on the 20th of September, Jane went into the state forest and began setting up her equipment. At that time, she drove a blue and white Chevy Blazer, and she parked it on an access road, and her equipment was set up from just behind her truck and into the wooded area about 30 yards. So Jane was working on her thesis, and the experiment she was carrying out had to do with one specific plant. She was studying the hog peanut plant, or more specifically, she was studying the leaves. The leaves of this plant had a particular phenomenon where they would turn toward the sun. On this particular research trip, she had set up equipment and was regularly making entries into her notes. And it seemed that they were minute-by-minute entries. However, those entries stopped just before 10 a.m. Also on September 20th, a couple from New Jersey planned an autumn camping trip to Blackbird State Forest. And after driving down or over to Delaware, they picked a spot for their tent and decided to take a walk. About 20 feet from the trail, though, they stumbled across the thing that nightmares are made from. The partially clothed body of Jane Pritchard, who was dead, having been shot in the back of the head. They immediately sent for authorities. Authorities responded, and even though this was a regularly hunted area, her death was ruled a homicide almost from the beginning, and her partially removed clothing suggested an assault had also taken place. The area near where Jane was found was roped off, and investigators thoroughly searched the area. They used metal detectors and sifted through the dirt around the area, looking for shells and casings and other evidence that might allow them to specify what type of weapon had been used. The evidence they found was collected and not revealed to the public, but sent to the FBI for analysis. However, the police did reveal that they had found a piece of hair. This is the mid-1980s, and DNA was still a baby forensic investigative tool, but this hair was collected and sent to a DNA lab in California for further analysis. The next step for the authorities was to reach out to the public. They began asking around for people who had been in the area who may have seen or heard something or someone. Over the course of the next year, they interviewed almost 300 people. The police also submitted shotgun shells and shotgun pellets to technicians at DuPont to see if they could narrow down the type of weapon used. During all of this reaching out to the public, a hunter came forward to the police and reported that he had seen Jane about 10 a.m. This young man was in his late 20s, and he was a janitor at a local pharmaceutical company. He told the police that he had been in the area hunting squirrels. He was able to describe Jane's clothes, her truck, and give detailed information about the equipment Jane had been using. The police were ecstatic to have such a detailed witness, and they were even more excited when this witness told authorities that he had seen another man in the area where Jane was at that time. And theoretically, this would make the second hunter the last person to see Jane alive. Now, this unknown man became the person of interest or the prime suspect, and he was described by the first witness as a white male, about 5'9", medium build, with a beard, wearing a brown jacket and blue jeans. There was enough information in his description to create a composite sketch that was released to the public with the hope of finding out who he was. Hey, crime fans, does a witness with that much detail seem too good to be true? Because it certainly did to me. And the police must have decided or come to that conclusion as well, because after they interviewed this first hunter 2 more times early that October, their star witness, who had all the answers, was arrested. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and possession of a deadly weapon in the commission of a felony and held without bail. And I'm sure that they thought they had a sure thing. I am sure that they thought that DNA was going to come back and it was going to convict this man, and they had all the evidence they would need, and the case was closed. until the report came back and the DNA didn't match. In August of the next year, 11 months later, the witness/suspect was released and the charges against him were dropped. He reportedly told the news outlets that he had lost his job over the arrest and that he would never make the mistake again of getting involved. In fact, his advice for anybody listening or reading his story was to never get involved. And I can't say I blame him for feeling a little salty. After this rush to judgment and subsequent release of the only suspect in the case went cold. And as technology improved, authorities continued to resubmit the DNA that was collected at the time. And as far as I have been able to research, no one else has ever been charged with Jane's death. So let's talk about our plausible theories here. One theory is that it was just a hunting accident, right? Whoever shot her didn't know they shot her. And that was ruled out almost immediately, probably because of her state of undress. So I guess there's only really two plausible theories if we rule out accidental shooting. And the first one is that the witness/suspect squirrel hunter did in fact kill Jane, and that DNA from the hair they found was unrelated trace evidence. That's one theory. Another theory is that he really did see a second hunter, and that second hunter has just never been found, and he is the one who committed the assault and the murder. Now, for clarification, in the accounts I read, the assault is always listed as presumed, and I'm guessing it is because she was partially undressed. I did not read about any evidence that made that presumption fact, but that could be the evidence that was part of the evidence that was held back by the police. Another thing I kind of jumped to my mind as I was reading about this case was that in my admittedly limited experience with hunting and weapons, shotguns are large caliber. I don't know any squirrel hunter who would go take a shotgun squirrel hunting. Not if you intended to eat the squirrel or use the pelt, because there would be nothing left. More likely, squirrel hunters would carry around low caliber rifles, like a .22. So this witness/suspect, if he did not have a shotgun, and again, his statements to the police were not released to the public in any of the reports that I saw. So I am not sure what he said that made them think, something's hinky in his story. But I also don't know what type of gun he had that he said he'd been hunting with. So I don't know. Just something that popped into my mind. I don't think squirrel hunters are using shotguns. I think that would kind of defeat the purpose. Authorities seem to have settled onto the idea that Jane's murder was a murder of convenience. They seem to have ruled out that Jane was targeted. They did not find any evidence that I read that she had been stalked or disliked or targeted in any way. And because it was not a targeted crime, it was a crime of convenience, it makes it a lot harder to solve, because your suspect pool is literally everybody who was in the state of Delaware that day. In, I think it was 2014, the state of Delaware created a cold case bureau whose job it is to specifically try to solve these hard to solve cold cases. This case does currently have an active case number, file number, and I believe there's still a reward being offered for information into who may have assaulted and killed Jane Richard. Super sad. The unsolved ones always are sad. Anyway, I don't know. This one left me kind of gutted, I think. I don't know. I did find a picture of Jane. I think this is the picture that her parents released to the media because it was in all of the reports I saw. I was also able to find a picture of the sketch that was released after they spoke to the first witness/suspect. These unsolved stories are always kind of sad. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I have a couple of other videos here I think you might like. I've also added that subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Give me a thumbs up, let YouTube know you liked the video. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know your theories on this case. And have a really great day.